In 2020, the winner of Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes was President Joe Biden. This was decided by less than 20,700 votes. In 2016, the winner was President Donald Trump, and the margin was less than 27,500. Now, past is often prologue. In 2024, all eyes are going to be on Wisconsin. And that's why Keep Our Republic is working extensively across Wisconsin to build trust in how elections are administered and awareness of the process after election night through the Electoral College convening in Madison. Spearheading this work is my colleague Kathy Bernier. Today, we'll have a chance to hear directly from her.
When Ben Franklin was leaving the Constitution Hall, he was asked if the founders had decided to have a republic or an autocracy. And he said, "We have a republic if we can keep it."
Kathy Bernier, thanks so much for taking the time and educating our listeners about the great work you've been doing in Wisconsin.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Ari.
So I've learned so much from you about the politics of the state, the manner in which Wisconsin administers its elections. And let's be honest, Wisconsin's going to be ground zero. It was decided by less than 25,000 votes in both the previous two presidential elections, if memory serves me. But why don't we just go back for a moment, take listeners on a bit of a journey of how we're sitting together. What drew you initially to public service at the county level, and then to electoral politics in the legislature, and for that matter, why the Republican Party?
What drew me into running for county clerk is what draws a lot of people into politics: dissatisfaction. I witnessed some precarious behavior by the county clerk. He wasn't organized. He spent a lot of his time during the day doing nothing. And so I decided to run for that seat, that I thought I could do a better job. Hence, I won the election. And then in 2010, I was a little frustrated with the county. As a county clerk, you're ministerial. You just don't have a say in things oftentimes. And it was a bit frustrating. And I thought I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to have a voice. And so running for the state assembly did not jeopardize my seat as county clerk, because the county clerk has a 4-year term. And I'm a single income household. So that had to be taken into consideration. I ran. I won by 87 votes. I point this out in our community engagement programs that I was nearly 1,000 votes ahead before the city of Eau Claire was in. I knew I had to have a significant lead as a Republican candidate in order to win that seat. And so everyone applauded when I walked in because I had such a huge lead. And I said, "Hold the phone. Eau Claire's not in yet." And in the end, I lost a lot of progress and still won by 87 votes on election night and 93 votes after the recount. My competitor asked for a recount. I figured she would, but I was very confident with our electoral system and how we run it, where the checks and balances are, and the accuracy of electronic voting equipment, that I knew that vote would not change. And so from there, Senator Moulton retired, and I had a conversation with the majority leader from the Senate. And he asked me if I would consider running for that open seat. They did a survey and determined that I had like almost a 60% name recognition in the 23rd Senate District. And that's very unusual for an assembly rep to have that high of name recognition. So I ran and I won quite easily.
Well, just remind listeners, so you've alluded to Eau Claire. You're from the county next door, but just we have listeners all over the country and a lot of student listeners, a sense of just the communities that you represented when you were in the legislature.
So I represented part of the city of Eau Claire my entire tenure, more of the northeastern portion of the city of Eau Claire, which is an urban area college community. I also represented the very rural parts, almost all of Clark County, which has more cows than people. So I had to be quite diverse in what I understand and knew about my district, some very rural. I represented the Amish. And even though the Amish do not vote, they were being evicted from their homes because they weren't following the Uniform Dwelling Code. But they couldn't follow the Uniform Dwelling Code because they did not have electricity or plumbing. And so Eau Claire County Board, county officials were evicting them from their homes, and they called upon me to help them. And so I was known around the state as the legislator who would help the Amish. And from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans contacted me and thanked me for helping the Amish and protecting their rights with their freedom of religion and their way of life. And you can't force people to live how you think they should live. And so I passed a bill to exempt the Amish from the uniform dwelling portion involving the structure has to follow, but the electrical and plumbing does not. And we had a big debate with the Department of Safety and Professional Services about gray water. And gray water is not harmful according to the DNR. And it continued for many years, actually. And I think in the end, the Amish won out so far.
We've had so many conversations, Kathy. I had no sense of that. As an organization, we're doing a lot of programming and engagement in Pennsylvania, and we have a large program coming up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Honestly did not realize there was a sizable Amish community up in Northwest Wisconsin. So, and then give folks, just as we're scene setting here, a sense of the legislature. It's a Republican majority, but how many seats in the lower house, how many seats in the Senate, and then your role during your tenure?
So we started out with like 4 or 5 seat lead in 2011 when we took office, and it's grown since then. The argument right now by Democrats is we gerrymandered significantly in order to gain those seats. I've explained to people, yeah, well, Democrats and Republicans do that. I understand that. And yes, they did certainly try to have an advantage. However, the Marquette seminar that was a couple of days ago, I attended, and it's the first time I heard a political science professional or anyone else talk about the voter behavior change. There's a huge voter behavior change in the state of Wisconsin, and all Western Wisconsin has gone red, Republican, where it used to be majority of Democrat voters. Same goes for Northern Wisconsin. There's only 2 counties that have voted blue now in the last couple of presidential elections, and that is Bayfield and Ashland counties. The rest used to devoutly vote for David Obey and vote Democrat. Since then, since Sean Duffy ran, they have been voting primarily Republican. So why is that? They consolidate their votes in large cities. Where it's turning more blue, where it used to be red, is in the suburban areas around Milwaukee and Dane County. There's a lot of people moving in there because it's the governmental seat. The capital is in Madison, and it's a huge university there in the city of Madison. And it's just growing leaps and bounds with Democrat voters. So that explains, for the most part, how we can have a huge Republican majority in the Assembly and the Senate and yet be very purple and lose statewide races to Democrats, with Ron Johnson being the exception.
Yeah, just to pick on a reference, Pennsylvania again, I think this sounds very similar to what's happened in the communities around Pittsburgh that were incredibly reliably blue, even during the Gore-Lieberman race of 2000, and now they're some of the reddest counties in Pennsylvania. There's probably a whole podcast or PhD thesis that can talk about some of these more rural or post-industrial communities. So in the legislature, you were a chair. Maybe you can share with listeners a little about your time as chair and some of the debates before 2020 and then and maybe more so in 21 and 22 that came before your committee and before the Senate as a whole?
Well, as a freshman legislator, I asked to be on the election committee. And of course, freshmen do not get to be the chair, but I was the co-chair, vice chair of the election committee. I served as the chair from there on out in the Assembly and the Senate for all of the years that I've been there. I had a relationship with the municipal clerks and county clerks, the people who have to run elections. And so almost always I ran things by them to get their input on election bills. And it was always understood and appreciated that I had the expertise needed to pass legislation in regard to elections. In 2020, after the 2020 election, that entirely changed. I had colleagues in the Senate trying to pass all kinds of legislation as a reaction to appease the Trump voters who were sure that there was massive fraud in the state of Wisconsin. And I held those up. And I had colleagues, it's unheard of, but I had colleagues, one in particular, who sent out a press release chastising me in a very unkind manner. And I stuck to my guns, and it caused a lot of upheaval in my caucus. Meanwhile, I'm trying to be on the Joint Finance Committee, and I ended up with COVID. It was a nightmare year, to
This is
say the least.
2021.
2021.
And
Yeah,
remind
it was.
listeners, so how many state senators are there? And then how big was the Republican caucus at that time?
There are 33 state senators, and we had 17 out of the 33.
So this
I
is
believe
like
that's the
a
number.
very small high school class almost. And to have that kind of level of drama that a fellow Republican state senator was publicly attacking you in the media, that must have been I don't know if it was unprecedented, but it certainly must have been uncomfortable.
Well, I understand the majority leader spoke to him, but I was fully expecting an apology in the caucus, and I didn't get one. So, and then to add insult to injury, as I'm stuck home with COVID and finally recovering and heading down, I got a phone call from the majority leader that said they were going to pull the bills from my committee and bring them directly to the floor. And I was shocked and appalled. I was 5 minutes out from caucus, so I flew in there and I explained to all of my members in my caucus that you all are chairs of a committee and you get to decide what we hear, what we don't hear, what gets stuck in the file cabinet, or what gets heard and passed forward to the floor. If they do this to me, they can do it to you. And that had some impact. And then I had several colleagues step up and support me in that, and they didn't follow through with their threat.
So you're most certainly putting on a lot of road miles now, but it's not weekly treks to be under the Capitol Dome in Madison. I don't want to assume that listeners have attended our programming in Wisconsin or have read any of the news articles about it. So give folks a snapshot of what Keep Our Republic's up to. And then as we wind down, also we'll talk about, to the extent you have a crystal ball, what you see the next year bringing in Wisconsin politics.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege to work with Keep Our Republic. It falls right into my bailiwick, understanding and recognizing all the checks and balances and the safeguards that are already in our electoral process. Every year, we would take a look at improving our electoral process, but for the most part, all of the things that are being said after 2020, almost all of the things that are being said are fictitious. They're not factual. They do not understand the electoral process, right down to Justice Gableman, who did not even understand how elections run, and he's trying to investigate elections. And so I have been honored and privileged to go around to individuals in this state and have community engagement programs that educate. And my partners, the really stars of the show, are the county clerks and municipal clerks who step up and help me educate the electorate on how elections are run, and they don't make any additional income from it, but they step up and help me willingly. And I just appreciate them so much. And we've had lots of good feedback on our programming. The Towns Association, we did a seminar for them, and the feedback was every single town board member should listen to this presentation. And so we are continuing that all the way through 2024. And we are hoping to tamp down the individuals who are spreading fraudulent information about our electoral system ahead of time. And so that when somebody says something that's absolutely false and could not possibly be true, the people we educate will be able to speak to that with a great deal of knowledge.
Well, I would just echo, I'm honored to work with you, Kathy, and I've learned so much. And yes, the credit absolutely goes to these county and municipal clerks who are taking time on a weeknight evening to be out there in front of their community and have not heated, but pointed, very open conversations. But also, I think credit to the hundreds and hundreds of Wisconsin residents who've come out to these programs and they've taken the time to learn about what's happening when they cast their vote and the days after as the vote's being canvassed and certified. So pass is often prologue. I imagine Wisconsin's going to be a razor thin margin. You have a Senate race as well. You alluded to the congressional delegation. So the final question, and certainly the presidential campaigns will be spending a lot of time and a lot of money in Wisconsin. But we asked this of all of our guests. The podcast is called If We Can Keep It. It's a reference to the line that Benjamin Franklin is rumored to have said in Philadelphia. It's a republic if we, the American people, can keep it. So are you generally optimistic as you look at the year ahead and you look at this sprint toward America's 250th birthday? Or these are unprecedented times, and we're seeing that election administration is somewhat of a fragile miracle every time that it goes off without a hitch.
Well, I'd be lying if I said that I thought everything was going to go swimmingly. Our country is one upheaval after another as of late. A lot to do with what's going on abroad. And so I am concerned that we are heading to a lot of unrest. I'm hoping that it will take care of itself. I think our federal leaders are in a position to bring calm to our country. And so we, from top down, bottom up, we're Americans first. And I think we need to start working together to understand each other and speak about our differences with respect and admiration for the other. And I don't see that right now. I see a lot of lawlessness, and that will continue through 2024 unless organizations like ours, Ari, really step up and talk about how we are Americans first, country first, before party, before politics, and before religious issues. We need to keep our country together. And Benjamin Franklin was right. He also was concerned that if the United States crumbles, it will be from within, not from without. So I think that they were wise warning.
Hear, hear. Well, I don't know if I can speak for listeners, but I hope they all agree. I most certainly do, and learned a lot in our conversation today, and just like I do every time I have a conversation with you, Kathy. So thank you, Godspeed, and safe travels.
Thank you.